Vladimir Putin threatening a possible nuclear escalation may not be the only thing to watch out for. For years, Russia has launched destructive cyber attacks in Ukraine, and experts say the U.S. would not be immune to similar attacks right here. Whether it's disabling an electric power grid, meddling the upcoming midterm elections, or messing with nuclear reactors, the United States must prepare for cyber war against Russia. Joining me now to discuss this and other national security threats is Miles Taylor, former DHS Chief of Staff and co-founder of the Renew America movement. And my old friend Nayera Hawk joins me. So excited to have you back. She's a former State Department senior advisor and host of The World Tonight on BNC. Thank you both for being here. Nayera, I want you to kick us off. I recall that Russia attacked our democracy in 2016, specifically targeting black voters. That was not the first time they attacked our democracy. I'm curious your thoughts on what's the biggest threat Russia poses to America right now, and what does an attack from Russia look like here on domestic soil?
Mm-hmm. It's the ongoing threat, Tiffany, of exploiting the existing divisions in the United States. Now, Russia did not create from whole cloth the idea of racism in America, but it certainly knew how to take advantage of it to the point where even the Mueller report, which everyone seems to have memory hold at this point, said that Russia has attacked the presidential election in a sweeping and systemic fashion. It then referred that to Congress to take action, but in a Trump administration, nothing was done about it. So a big part of why we are where we are today with Russian aggression in Ukraine and against NATO is because for several years in the Trump administration, the work of Putin was effectively being done to weaken the NATO alliance, to open a U.S. intelligence to the scrutiny and victimization of Russian entities, and to continue to allow this narrative, the narrative of white supremacy that dominates Putin's ideology, to work through Donald Trump and infect the American public once again.
It's quite frightening to see, and something I have to say that's really terrifying me, Miles, and that's Havana syndrome. Sadly, you are very familiar with this terrorist threat. You yourself have experienced it. I want our viewers to take a listen to your former colleague, Olivia Troy, who also was impacted by Havana syndrome, and then I'll talk about you and how you're doing on the other side of that.
It was like this piercing feeling on the side of my head. It was like, I remember it was on the right side of my head, and I got like vertigo. I was unsteady. I felt nauseous. I was somewhat disoriented, and I remember thinking like, okay, if you don't fall down the stairs, like you've got to find your ground again and steady yourself.
Now, we've been hearing about Havana syndrome for a while. U.S. intelligence has linked this to Russia. Miles, how are you feeling? And tell us about when you felt impacted by Havana syndrome.
Yeah, well, look, Tiffany, I'm doing okay today. There were 2 episodes that happened in my home on Capitol Hill previously. This was 3 years ago, and I was alarmed by it, didn't know what it was. But as we started to see more information about this in the government, and as I heard about more cases that were happening in that time period, that became very concerning. It became concerning because we knew that an adversary was deploying these tactics overseas. What we didn't know at the time is that they would have the gall to do it here in the United States homeland. And as Nayera just noted, why did allegedly the Russians, and I very much do think this is being perpetuated by the Russians with directed energy weapons, why did they feel emboldened to be able to do this to U.S. officials in their own homes in the United States? It's because the Trump administration didn't respond the way it should have to 2016 election meddling and ongoing Russian interference. That failure to respond, that failure to create deterrence, made the Russians feel emboldened to bring the threat here into our homeland. That's why these things are connected. We do need to worry as the conflict in Ukraine goes on that the Russians will bring some of these measures here to the United States homeland. Again, they've got a spectrum of options. They're already engaging in one end of the spectrum, propaganda, as Nayera noted, trying to divide Americans continuously, playing on issues like race and racism in the United States, but also the deployment of malware, ransomware attacks. That's potentially on the horizon. And then there's this more extreme end of the spectrum, which is meddling in U.S. infrastructure, U.S. elections, and potentially engaging in these physical attacks against people in the United States. That's a big concern. It has happened before. And again, because of the failures of the last administration, we have not told the Russians that they shouldn't do it. We have not demonstrated that there would be the consequences. Fortunately, the Biden administration is sending those signals that there will be severe repercussions for that type of meddling and activity.
Yeah, and you're totally right, Miles. It's not lost on me that this is a midterm year, and, you know, we don't really know what the Russians are capable of. The private sector has already been warned about ransomware attacks. Nayara, I'm curious from you, is there anything that, for those of us lay people at home watching, is there anything that we could or should be doing to protect ourselves, protect our assets? I mean, you know, Miles was talking about his engagement with Havana syndrome, but it's also our devices. What should we be on the lookout for, and what can we do?
You may recall that while Russia was looking to have troops on the border with Ukraine, about 100,000 people gathered there for months doing military exercises. There was also an incident of an attack on Colonial Pipeline that had the entire southeast of the United States backed up for weeks for gas lines. And that blame for that fell on Russia. Following that, Biden and Putin had their one-on-one conversation. They did create some boundaries of what's considered illegal almost for an infrastructure. Critical infrastructure is part of that. The idea here of what the United States is trying to balance, though, is to, while supporting Ukraine, to not make this a war between the United States and Russia for all the reasons that we're discussing, right? Because that just continues to escalate the challenges and the problem. It opens up the United States to cyber attacks. However, there will come a point where Putin, given the sanctions, the crippling of his economy, will feel cornered and isolated enough that he will lash out. So the preparation for that has been underway over the last year for the broader infrastructure capabilities of the United States. Several what seem like really boring announcements coming out of the government that have told us that they are doing better now about making sure that our energy grids and our pipelines are protected against cyber attacks. But at an individual level, right? You know, make sure that your passwords are more than just your birthday. Make sure that you enable two-factor authentication, and recognize that it's less for the individual. It's less about a direct attack on you. Most viewers are not in the U.S. government with security clearances right now. You'll be fine. You'll be feeling this with the pinch at the gas pump, and you'll see this across your social feeds with Russian disinformation. And that's pretty straightforward. You could look at on your Twitter feed if it's a new account with like multiple letters and 0 followers, and they're telling you how Putin is right and everything he's doing is okay. Right? It's the disinformation that we have to keep an eye out and just be more aware of what we're reading.
And part of the reason why they have blocked certain social media outlets in Russia, and just to our viewers, share responsibly, a lesson we learned the hard way in 2016. Thank you so much, Miles Taylor. Glad to see you're doing well. Thank you for your helpful insight. And Nayara Hawk, very happy to have you on the Cross Connection this morning.